Okay, so here's our first real lesson in factoring. Just like we've seen before, I just want to remind you of some things. The rules for factoring, when we're going to be doing some larger equations, we still need to be taking out our GCF first, which is what we did in our last lesson where we talked about which number could divide into both of them, and we undid the distributive property. If there's a GCF, we need to do that very first thing so that we're looking with smaller numbers. And then also our equations must equal 0. So if for some reason everything is not on one side of the equation, we're going to have to rearrange that. And we'll look at a few examples like that today. So what we've talked about in the past, we were given something in factored form, and we were able to find roots or solutions. Remember, those were the x-intercepts, so they were x values, and because they were inside parentheses, they were opposite. So for example, this blue equation could give me a root at positive 1, 0, and another root at negative 8, 0. So today, we're going to talk about how to find the roots when they give you something in standard form. So before, remember, we just kept saying roots and we would put a question mark because we didn't know how to find those yet. We were just kind of putting a pin in that. But today we're going to talk about how to actually find them when they give us an equation that says y equals x squared, I'm just giving you an example, minus 5x plus 6. All right, this is that's the goal for today, is to figure out how to still get the roots when we're given an equation that is not already written in parentheses. Okay, so thinking back to our last slide, there are two things that we always have to do first. One, we need to take out a GCF, and two, we need to make our equation equal 0. I'm actually going to make our equation equal 0 first. So notice that right now it equals negative 24, but I needed that to say equals 0. So to fix that, I'm going to add 24 to both sides. Now notice on the left side over here, there's nothing for the 24 to add to. I've got something with x squared, something with x, and now just a 24. And because of that, they're going to stay separate pieces. So my new equation really says 2x squared minus 16x plus 24 equals 0. Now I also need to take out my GCF, so I'm going to look at these three numbers that I have here, and I'm asking myself what's something I can take out of all of those or divide into all of those, and it's really asking for the greatest number. So if I think about the greatest number I could take out, that's going to be a 2. And remember, factoring or greatest common factor is just like doing division. So the number that distributes goes to the front. And then if I go back and divide, that gives me x squared minus 8x plus 12 equals 0. Okay, so now at this point, I want you to kind of notice this front number. Remember, the front number is just like my slope. It doesn't tell me anything about my roots, so even though it's important and I don't want to lose it, I'm going to kind of ignore it for us trying to actually find the roots for this equation. So I'm really just worried about this inside part. Now the inside part is what gives us, it's kind of like it gives us the pattern. So think about when we did the puzzle problems. The inside part tells me some things about the puzzle. So what I mean by that is we have our little puzzle. The last number, the C, is our multiplication. All right, so this number right here is our product. And if you remember what the puzzles looked like, that number is going to go at the top. And then the middle number is going to be our sum, which goes to the bottom. Now this is a little different because we haven't done negatives before. So our goal is to come up with two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to give me negative 8. And remember, that's just something that you have to work on your calculator until you figure out the two numbers. And so hopefully, pause the video for a moment and kind of think about that. but hopefully you're coming up with -6 and -2. Now this is the cool thing. This is why I had you all try these puzzles, was so you could get in the pattern of working out these problems. These two numbers help me to write my factors, so this is what I mean. The 2 is still in the front, it's my slope, and now I know I'm going to have 2 parentheses. The reason you have 2 parentheses is because you have x squared. If it's at x to the third, you might have 3 parentheses, but we won't worry about that. So 2 parentheses, and then my numbers just help me fill in. I have x, and then my number is -6, -6, so I say x minus 6. And then my other factor is going to say x with the other number I chose, -2. So notice those two numbers that you're picking, -6 becomes x minus 6, -2 becomes x minus 2. And now we can find our solutions. So from this, I have 2 roots. I have a root at, think opposite, 6, 0. And I have another root at 2, 0. Now, that may seem like a lot of work to you, but really you all know how to do all of those steps, so it's just a matter of putting all that together to come up with that answer. I'll do 1 or 2 more quick problems just so that you get the hang of what we're doing here. Alright, so remember we always have to start with our problem equaling 0. So I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. X squared minus 2x minus 15 equals 0. There is no GCF, so I'm ready to go ahead and set up my little puzzle here. And you don't have to draw it out like a box like this. I'm just doing that so that you all can kind of see it the way that we've talked about it in the past. So remember, my top number is my product, which is this final number, -15. The bottom is the middle number, -2. And I have to come up with 2 numbers that solve this puzzle. And if I think about that, my 2 numbers I think are going to be -5 and +3. So when I go to write my factors, I don't have a slope here, or it's not a new slope, so my slope's just 1. My factors are going to be x minus 5, x plus 3, and then I can go ahead and find my roots. So I have 2 roots here. I have a root at 5, 0, and another root at -3, 0. Other than picking the numbers themselves, I think the only part that is potentially the hardest is just keeping up with your signs. And that's something that will only get better with practice, so we will just keep practicing until you all feel more confident about the signs. All right, last one. I'm only going to do question 4 here. We can start with question 5 in class together tomorrow. So on question 4, need it to equal 0 first, so I'm going to add 54 to both sides. X squared plus 15x plus 54 equals 0. I'm going to set up my puzzle. The top number is 54, comes from the end. My bottom number is 15, comes from the middle. If I try to think about what solves that puzzle, I think that's going to be 9 and 6. So my factors, I have 1 for my slope, x plus 9, x plus 6 equals 0. And from there I can find my roots. And I have a root at -9, 0, and another one at -6, 0. All right, hopefully seeing those last 3 examples kind of back to back, hopefully you see the pattern and start to notice some things that are happening every time.